At the end of your life, what will be your legacy? What will you leave behind for future generations? For the world, join the World Messenger, Izabela Lundberg, each week as she brings you a new distinguished guest from the business, sports, or entertainment world to share their success, their struggles, and their lessons. They will share their insights into current hot topics that affect everyone. Izabela facilitates an intimate, vulnerable environment to find the true value of humanity and real leadership. Are you ready for your legacy? The legacy that matters?
Hello, my beautiful friends. It's Izabela Lundberg here, the World Messenger, and I'm welcoming you for another epic Legacy Leader Show. Today's guest is joining us from Georgia. He is exceptional human. He is retired successful journalist back in the days, guys, when journalism was the journalism. He is morning news director and executive producer, or he was corporate communication executive. He is phenomenal volunteer, blood donor, and I'm absolutely blessed to have him call him friend and mentor, actually. So please welcome Brian Olson. Brian, welcome.
Hi, Izabela. How are you? I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you so much for finding time to join us. I know you have busy recreational schedule, which is fun. That so many of us can be quite a bit of jealous.
It's all right. It's okay.
You earned it. You earned it. You deserve it. And I'm so glad to live vicariously and see you guys having blast. So how is everything in Georgia these days?
It's great. You know, we moved here. Our kids and grandkids live about 20 miles away from us, was rather the reason we moved to Georgia after being 20 years in Colorado. But we're on beautiful Lake Lanier, and that's just kind of a picture from one of our kayaking trips that we make all the time. And we really love it here. Although, like everywhere else in the world, COVID-19 has just sort of put a damper on a lot of stuff. But like communities everywhere around the country, we're finding ways to deal with it and adjust to it. And being out in the lake and stuff like that is a pretty safe thing to do.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you're able to do that. So I'm glad things are going well for you back in Georgia. And with the move and change, obviously, a lot of changes happened. And one of the biggest changes that I'm seeing that happen, I'm sure, is how journalism actually changed, how profession changed over the years. Do you mind sharing a little bit of your personal story? How did you even get into journalism and some really interesting journey that we can unpack here?
Well, Izabela, as you well know, life, you can wake up one morning and think, okay, this is the way my life is going to go. And then you look back at it after you retired like me and said, holy cow, I didn't see that coming. But I was about to start college at the University of Wisconsin, and just on a whim. And actually, I was really more interested in going into just radio. But I was going to be a radio, television, film production major at the University of Wisconsin. So I wrote a letter to Walter Cronkite at the CBS Evening News and just saying, Mr. Cronkite, what would you suggest I study in college? And he wrote back. I never thought he would, but he did. So never hesitate to write to somebody who you think can help you out. They'll probably respond to you. But it was interesting, as one of the world's renowned journalists, he said, don't study journalism. He said, learn how our country works. Learn the difference between a county commissioner and a city council person. Learn the different roles of the House and the legislature and the governor, both federally and locally, and understand how our country works, how our economy works. Because he said, you can't report on things if you don't understand them. And so, I kind of followed along. And actually, my first job I applied for, I walked in off the street at Channel 5 Television in Cheyenne. That's where my wife is from. And we wanted to move out there. And so we did. And I just walked in off the street and just said, hey, I'd like to maybe get a production job, even part-time. I just want to get my foot in the door. But as I talked to the general manager, we started talking more about what he thought about our news and the news they were doing. And I reported back to him a couple of weeks later, and he offered me a job in the news department. And within 6 months, I was a news director and anchor at the station. So some years after that, I'm on the board of directors of the Radio Television News Directors Association, and I'm at a big luncheon in New York, and I'm seated at the head table in between Governor Mario Cuomo and Attorney Alan Dershowitz, feeling like a fish out of water. And it was just interesting. But out in the crowd, I spotted Walter Cronkite at the CBS table. So I said, "Excuse me, gentlemen, I need to say hi to somebody." And so I walked up to Walter, and I was with the CBS affiliate. And I said, "Walter, years ago, you wrote me a letter. And I listened to what you said to me, and I followed what you said to me. And here I am sitting at the head table of this big luncheon, News Association luncheon. I said, you should be at the head table, not me." And Walter said, "I hate being at the head table because I'm always worried about spilling something on my tie." So, so we just chatted for a couple of minutes. I had to get back. Of course, I didn't want to bother him. But wouldn't you know, a few months later at a News Association luncheon, our Paul White Award dinner, Walter was our keynote speaker. And we were at the head table together. And so we got to talk a lot more and just chat. And like I say, he never wanted to be at the head table, but he ended up at a head table with me. And so, we had our picture taken and all that sort of stuff. And then a few years after that, when I was at Channel 3 in Phoenix, he was coming by to promote his book. And I brought that picture with me, and I had him autograph it. So, it started out with a letter, and our paths crossed several times. And then he introduced me to someone who became my news writing mentor, Merv Block, who was one of the principal writers for the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. So it all started with just one letter, and boom.
Wow, that is such a powerful story. Actually, it started with courage, with desire, interest, and for you to identify who you're looking up to. And for people that don't know who Walter is, do you mind just sharing? I mean, he is known as the most trusted American journalist and broadcaster, and obviously had a very powerful tenure on the CBS. But do you mind, just from your perspective, and then just for others who might be a little bit younger, to really highlight his legacy, actually?
Well, Walter Cronkite started out as one of Murrow's boys, as they say. Edward R. Murrow, of course, and Walter Cronkite and Andy Rooney, all correspondents covering World War II. And that's where Walter got his start. He went to the University of Texas and to study. And that's where, and my youngest daughter is a graduate of the University of Texas. So there's another connection. But even he flew aboard, Walter flew aboard combat missions with the 8th Air Force. In fact, there was one time they were so crazy, he was actually having to fire at German aircraft. He was firing a machine gun. But he later went on into radio at CBS and then became the anchor of the CBS Evening News. And Walter was voted the most trusted man in America, not the most trusted journalist, but the most trusted man in America. And when you look back at some of the moments in our nation's history when President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, it was Walter Cronkite who broke the news to us about the assassination and that he had died. And when Americans first landed on the moon, it was Walter Cronkite who didn't hide his emotions. It was such a memorable moment in American space exploration that he was basically on camera saying, "Wow," and he was somebody that I think everybody on Main Street could identify with. And it was a time when the CBS, they did a half hour of news a day. They did a half hour at 5:30 where we lived, and maybe different. It changed in different time zones. But him and Brinkley and they were a generation of journalists who came up through crazy times in our country, and really made a place in history. And news has evolved in many ways good, and I think some ways bad. But Walter Cronkite was the person who told you the most important things going on in the world, and you trusted him.
Wow, guys, this is so powerful. So look at what Brian did. He was young. How old are you when you wrote that letter? I'm just curious, because people are so afraid and paralyzed to approach people or to do things, to think outside of the box, or just follow their guts. And this is such a courageous move. Now understanding the power behind this man. I mean, I'm just getting, goosebumps. Like, would I dare to approach him if I was in your shoes?
I was 18. I was in my I was in my senior year in high school, Goodrich High School in Fond du Lac. And I just said, why not? I mean, I didn't expect him to write back. I mean, he's Walter Cronkite, for Pete's sake, But it was about a week and a half later, and this is the days, not email or anything. It was a typed out a letter and put it in the mailbox. And I remember opening up the mailbox at our house, and there was a letter from CBS News, New York, and I opened it up, and it was a personal note from Walter. It wasn't a form letter. It was a personal letter that he wrote and signed, and it laid a foundation for my whole life.
Wow, that is, I can see why, and I can see how. But again, if you did not dare, if you didn't do it, and a lot of times, how many people pass on opportunities that are right in front of them because they don't dare to do it. Look at that. So you were mentioning obviously this amazing ride and opportunities and awards, but how actually journalism changed and newscast actually, and I'm blown away seeing that a TV newscast was done when in 1890. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Well, that was something, again, I had mentioned Merv Block, who through Walter I got to meet, and he was my news writing mentor. And one of the things that Merv taught me was you have to make the story meaningful on Main Street. Literally, that's your viewers. He referred to them as Main Street. And it was 1990, and it was Wyoming's centennial year. And this was a big moment in Wyoming history. The state was 100 years old, and there were just events going on all year long, and we covered them, all the balls and gala things. And there was a wagon train that made its way across Wyoming, and we had crews with them. But there was something that just wasn't, I just felt we were missing out on something. How can we make this anniversary important to our viewers? And the culmination of the statehood ceremonies was a recreation of the statehood ceremony at the Capitol. Governor Sullivan at the time, for instance, played his counterpart 100 years ago, territorial governor Francis E. Warren. And then the light bulb went off. I said, why don't we do our newscast as if it was July 1st, 1890, instead of 1990.
Oh, now makes sense.
so I got together we only had about 6 days to do this, and I got together with the State Museum, and my team completely embraced the idea. But we were on set wearing period costume. I had a bowler hat and these kind of pince-nez glasses on, very distinguished journalist, and we acted like it was July 1st, 1890, and all our reporters out in the field were dressed in period costume. I remember our sports reporter did a story about a new sport evolving back east called baseball. And we also did a story, in our archives, we found a story from back in the day about a stagecoach robbery in Laramie, Wyoming. But we took our viewers back, and it was a risk because we wanted to be serious about it. But we did the newscast as if it was July 1st, 1890. And immediately after the newscast, we got off set, our phones rang off the hook. Literally thousands of requests for copies of the newscast, just for souvenirs. There were teachers who were asking for them. They wanted to show it to their students. It was trusting your audience that they were willing to take a ride with you, and they did, and they enjoyed it. And so there was a risk, but there's risk in everything we do. But if your gut's with you, take the risk. It'll usually work out.
That is brilliant lesson, and that is so epic. But in order to also to have that, you have to have a trust, right, and build that trust by knowing your audience, knowing who you are dealing with. So that is very, very impactful. So how? And
I should add quickly that it was a team effort. I had fantastic people working on my team, and we were all in this together. We all embraced. We either had to be in it together or not at all. And the team embraced it. They got into it, and it was a team effort, and that's why it was so successful.
Wow, that is another great golden nugget here, guys, that you're watching and listening, because so much more we can accomplish together. And when we are unified and shared the vision, unity of team and shared vision makes magic, doesn't it?
Yep. Hire people smarter than you are.
That's why I look always for smart, accomplished mentors like Brian, and learning and fast forwarding. What can I do to actually apply with things that are happening right now? And obviously, television changed so much. And initially, when you said earlier, you started didn't know what's going to happen, but all of those things that you mentioned thus far obviously impacted tremendously your career and plan. Do you mind sharing trajectory of that? How that's changed for something that you maybe thought, I'm just gonna double my toe in it, or this might be my backup plan into truly full-fledged career?
Well, the irony was when we moved to Wyoming, my wife and I had also enlisted in the Wyoming Air National Guard. I wanted to fly C-130s. It's a big four-engine jet prop transport aircraft. And so I enlisted, and I had told the station that, that I was enlisting in the Air National Guard, and I would have to go through basic training and officers candidate school and all this sort of stuff before I could go to work for them. And they were totally cool with that. And the only problem is I was right at that point where I'm going into the Air National Guard. And my flight physical, unfortunately, I had a hyperthyroid condition a couple of years before that, but that ended my flying career right there. So I just ended up, going right to the television station, and I said, "Oh, I can work now." So, but my first choice was the Air Force. But at the same time, in my career, I got to cover the military a lot. I went to the Air War College. I went to SAC Missile Comp at Vandenberg. I did stories on 3 aircraft carriers. So I sort of had all the fun of the military without having to go to basic training. So it worked out.
I could tell, and sometimes we don't even know why we're here for, right? What we're really
Yeah.
destined to do, what we have the natural talent, like your excellent, exceptional communication, not only verbal and written, but also understanding again the audience and how to connect with the audience, and how journalism changed so much based on demands as technology developed, as audience changed their priorities and shifts, right? And
Yep.
adaptation to that. So if you don't mind just sharing some of the journalism one-on-one golden nuggets, what did you learn so that journalists or people that are having their own blogs or their own shows can really take it to the heart, some of the most pivotal things that helped you out?
Well, again, referring back, I'm going to give you 3 tips, and I would tell this to college students. These are the 3 most important things to understand about journalism. The first 2 were from my friend again, Merv Block, my writing mentor, and I said, so rule number 1 is subject, verb, object, and rule number 2 is attribution before assertion, and number 3 is don't forget to order porta potties. And that's about the time where the kids in the class would, what? And that came from a story. We were covering a rare hurricane coming off the Gulf of California, coming up into Arizona. It was about a Cat 3 hurricane. It's about 1997, I think it was. And I had 4 satellite trucks at my disposal, and top people. I was the field producer, great reporters and photographers. And we were assigned to a compound where, all the media could be and all that sort of stuff. The one thing that was missing, though, and we're doing live shots every 5 minutes. It's not like you do a live shot and then you got half the day off. You're going nonstop for 48 hours. But I had all this technology, all this talent. The one thing we didn't have was a place to go to the bathroom.
Wow.
So working with local folks, we arranged to get porta potties into the news compound. And so, because you can do all this stuff, but when nature calls, it calls. So you just got to be. So there's one of those lessons that you just say, "Wow, I never thought of that, but I do now."
Yeah, you have to plan very well, and kind of work backwards. What you may need and what that looks like, and then what how to close the gap.
Yep.
So in terms of those 3 golden nuggets, those are great ones. Again, thank you for sharing that. And they're kind of segue into the journalism today, obviously, because we have national, we have a local, we have a national, we have international news, we have major week, obviously, this week with election, with results, with a lot of buzz and noise, frankly. It's like, is a true depth of anything in some of the posts or writings or clips, and sometimes we can see how journalism really can rile us up and then also calm us down and give us the confidence of what is really happening and what is the true pulse of the current situation. So do you mind elaborating a little bit about that?
Well, again, when I started out in news, and again with just referring back to the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite, it was a 30-minute newscast, and now we are bombarded with 24-hour news sources. I remember the video clip of when Ted Turner just was about to throw the switch on CNN, launching that. Was it 1980 or something like that? And he threw the switch, and he said, "Remember, once I turn this on, we can't stop. We're going 24/7." But something just I read this morning really struck home with me, and it was talking about, and again, as we record this the day before the election, but recording about all the confusion about the election and what's going on and what's going to happen. And it struck me, we've been electing presidents in this country for hundreds of years. Why did it get complicated? How can one person, one vote? And you and I are both immigrants to this country. We understand that, we have to know that. How did it get so complicated? And this is just my personal theory, but when you're going 24 hours a day, or you're a local newscaster and you're doing 4.5 hours in the morning alone, that's more than most newscasts used to do in a week. You lose the valuable time to think and ponder, and you're always looking for the new angle. The election's coming up tomorrow. The election's coming up. Oh, we're voting. How's the voting going on? And you said, well, we reported on that half an hour ago. What can we do different? And I think that's a path that is steering us not in a good way, where we're always trying to reinvent an already great wheel. All this is one person, one vote. Yes, there are issues and technical things, but it should not be this complicated. And the only reason I think it's complicated is the nonstop bombardment of news and information. And that comes with social media too. I mean, we have these wonderful tools now called, I don't know if you can see that or not, I'm waving my cell phone, but we can create you're creating news content right now. So that social media has broken the wall that used to exist between news and the audience. We would deliver it, and it was a one-way street. And we really have to hold ourselves accountable professionally. But now it's a two-way street. Somebody can report a story, and then at home, you can say, "Oh, I think they're wrong. I don't agree with them." So what do? You go on Twitter. Bam, 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 bam. And let's say you have 100 followers or 1,000 followers, and they agree with you. So they retweet it to all their, and pretty soon you have this avalanche. Avalanches start with a little bunch of snow, and then it turns into this great big thing. The great thing about social media, Izabela, is everybody has access to it. The bad thing about social media is everybody has access to it.
Very, very true. And that is why, from the legacy point and from the leadership standpoint, very important, are we contributing part of the problem, or are we contributing to part of solution? And how responsibly we're not only consuming but also disseminating information. So excellent point in terms of that. It's a danger, but it also a great opportunity, and yes, in a way it kind of shifts this finest hour of the journalism, and this week will be epic. I'm obviously, by time the viewers and listeners get this, will be a few days later after elections. So maybe an opportunity to also project, what are you thinking in terms of shifts and change? It's not even who is going to win, and it's not at all political aspects of it, but I'm just startled to see how much tension is there created, that I really hope that by time Friday or Saturday or following Monday arrives, we will have much more calmer waters and more sense of direction. Because
I hope the focus on election day is not which political candidate won, but if we the people won, the American people won. It's disconcerting to see businesses in various downtowns boarding up their windows because of possible unrest after the election. And think about that, the United States of America, and these businesses are boarding up their windows because they're worried about violence and rioting and all, and that's not the United States of America. But again, I think local media is really carrying the torch for quality journalism now. And I'll cite some examples because they all involve risk-taking. At 9 News, KOSA in Denver, Kyle Clark's broadcast Next I think it's been in the air now for about 3 years. But they took a different tact towards reporting. First of all, he didn't wear a tie on the air, but he really communicated and interconnected with the viewers, both in traditional ways and in social media. Another example is the Colorado Sun. That was a newspaper formed by reporters who found themselves out of work through consolidation in the media. You know, the Rocky Mountain News a few years ago, it shut down. And another sad thing is hedge funds are buying up newspapers, and they're laying off all the journalists. And you know, journalists are essential to our democracy, but the local journalists live in the same communities we do. They live in the South. I've subscribed to the Gainesville Times here in Gainesville, Georgia, because it's a local newspaper, and I need to support it. I want local news that I can trust, and I write, and I contact the editor and things like that. But you know, our kids go to the same schools, we eat at the same places, we shop at the same stores, we drive on the same roads, and that's the accountability factor in journalism that local journalists have over the national journalists. The brain trust for the national media, and again, this is just my opinion, but it's in Washington, D.C. and New York City. And there's not a connection there. Although I think, and again, I tend to refer to CBS News just because I was connected with them for so long, but even it's starting to work out. CBS now has CBS and the app. And you can go on there and you can get news content from CBS affiliates in Denver, News 4, again, another outstanding reporting organization. I've done lots of things in their newsroom, but you can get it from Los Angeles or New York or Chicago. And so they're finding a way. The best asset that the networks have is the local journalist, because they're on the ground covering those stories in their communities every single day. The folks in New York and Washington, D.C. are not. Finally, more and more, they are starting to listen to what the reporters in markets like Cheyenne or Denver or Gainesville, Georgia are saying, because we live here.
That is so powerful. And thank you for explaining and your perspective of that, the differences of the local versus national or even international news. And you spot on, because we have to understand what is going on in our own backyard before we can really look at what is going on elsewhere, and then also how to position, how to support, how to make a difference, and all of that. You mentioned twice already the tie, and I have to just ask this: do you know who invented the tie?
I do not.
Actually, Croatians did. So if you Google
Really?
that, as a proud Croatian, I have to say, I know majority of men hate it, but I wanted to say that is attribution to my homeland and Croatians.
Wow, I did not know that.
I understand the tie represented and still does more of that stoic, conservative, or very highly professional look. And in the news, when we also want to relate, when we want to connect, we want to be approachable, right? So
Yeah.
I can also see why a lot of local news agencies are shifting that and making themselves more blending in with the regular people and being one of them in community, instead of portraying things outside of the community, which is hugely, hugely powerful.
Well, and the technology we're using right now, a Zoom call. I could never have imagined, local news, and then they get the COVID-19 pandemic worldwide, and all of a sudden, newsrooms, which are known for having tight quarters, they're very group-orientated, groupthink places. All of a sudden, your news team is spread out. They're in their basements. Kyle Clark, for example, again, I'm a big fan. He's doing a newscast from his basement. What? So why wear a tie in your basement? That makes no sense. But along with that logistical challenge that they've had to make, but still putting the news out every single day from a myriad of spare bedrooms and rooms and garages or whatever, and being their own camera people, they're having to cover other stories as well. A friend of mine who anchors in Portland, Oregon, their downtown has been just riots every night, or you go to all the other heartbreaking news that goes around the country. So you're just getting the news out under this pandemic is difficult. But then you get all these other monstrous stories thrown at you, including an election like this one. So I truly think that this is local journalism's finest hour. History will look back at this time and saying that local journalism stepped up and they succeeded. And you may not agree with everything they say or report, but you know what? You got choices. You don't like this station, watch another one. You don't like that station, watch another one. But watch one of them. Read one of the local papers. Listen to local radio. Believe me, they are working super hard just to give you the news that you need.
That is so very important because they're also dealing with so many obstacles, as you just mentioned, from where they're reporting, technology use, and making sure that it is quality and still can disseminate the information and synchronizing with everybody else due to COVID, because you cannot have a group of people present, yet understanding what is going on the streets. And right now with COVID rising everywhere across the country, it is very also challenging and difficult to be involved and anticipate, right, what will happen next. But you kind of have to be, as the story is unfolding, and more than ever to be alert and ready and be able to provide timely and relevant information, and of course always aiming for the quality. So I believe that, in my opinion, now looking of the modern times, this is one of the most challenging and most difficult times to actually produce the news. Wouldn't you say that?
Well, I think it's as challenging in news as it is for businesses of any way, shape, or kind. I mean, you look at the, I got a cat wants to walk into my picture here, but you look at the challenges that businesses. Let's say you've owned a business where you're used to going into a store to pick up something or sit down in a restaurant, and we've changed the way we have to do business. Instead of going to the grocery store now, we order online, we pull up outside the store, we punch in a number, we're here, and they come out to your car and put the groceries in your trunk and off you go. But guess what? We're getting groceries and they're still selling groceries. The same accounts for news. We still need news. And so the news people are finding a way to keep our product being delivered to our customers. And another point I make too, which holds true for whatever business, but including journalism, is our viewers now control our brand. Your customers control your brand. And I learned that at a marketing conference I attended at Coca-Cola headquarters in Atlanta about 11 years ago. And they made that point. This is Coca-Cola saying, we don't control our brand anymore. Our customers control our brand. And so you have to remember that too. So again, that's the advantage of local. They understand their brand ambassadors because they're their neighbors. We live right next door to each other, so it's a good working relationship. But people are finding a way to succeed, as you well know.
Absolutely. And I think that is very, very important, because we need to be very creative, and now allows you for your creativity to shine in so many different ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, opportunity is there. This country, people talk about our turbulent times. When I moved to the United States in 1967, I remember my senior year in high school. We had lost Dr. King to an assassin in April of that year. And then in June, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. And I remember the principal announcing over the PA that Robert Kennedy had died. And so Dr. Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, within a few months, had both been assassinated. And I remember my teacher coming up from behind me. It was a current events class of all things. And he said, "Brian, so what do you think of the United States so far?" And then we had the Vietnam War going and all the protests. Later that year, the Chicago Convention, the Democratic Convention, was just chaos. Horrible times. How did we get through that? But you know what? We did. And one of the ways that we got through it is people in the news business were keeping us informed as to what was going on.
Wow, that is so powerful, because you're right. Every milestone, every situation that we live currently, presently, appears to be one of the most important, more significant, most challenging, more difficult. But in reality, looking historically, we've been through all of these things, through pandemics and major changes in this country, and we overcame and we persevered, and we're still a beautiful, proud nation in a way, right?
We are.
We have a lot of challenges ahead of us and a lot of changes that are not being anticipated, but I feel like we have such amazing intelligence of people with great skill set that I'm excited to see what unfolds in months and years to come.
Well, this is a time for us to actively engage, not only with our elected representatives, in fact, actively challenge them, regardless of your political persuasions, but you can do so politely. And, I belong to a couple of really good Facebook groups where we have very civil political discussions. We may differ on lots of issues, but we're more focused on solving problems than pointing fingers. And, but what we've gone through, look at 9/11. What a horrible day that was. But so was Pearl Harbor. But guess what? We got through it. We found a way to move on and continue as a nation. And I have every firm belief that we will continue to do the same.
That is brilliant. That is fantastic. Thank you for sharing for that point of view. And if you don't mind, I just want to slightly switch the gears and want to ask you, I mean, somebody like yourself who is still extremely active in community and wants to make a difference and impact, and it does that very well. In addition, obviously, your career path and all the phenomenal successes you had, what is still left in your bucket list? I mean, you traveled so much, you're doing so much. And one of the things I want to kudo you, that you're blood donor, that you're consistent, that you're always looking, how can I serve and how can I help? And guys that you're watching and listening, this is phenomenal mindset to have, and you're always happy. You always exuded the optimism, and I'm just like so glad to have you in my circle of friends and colleagues, because it is such a wonderful trait.
Well, it's you want to keep busy. I apologize if you hear some hammering in the background. We're just getting our new basement finished, so they're doing the fine tuning work on it right now. But in case you're hearing some banging going on, but no, I'm running. I'm running for our homeowners association board of directors, and with there's about 1,000 homes in our community, and it's a 55 plus very active community. It's a beautiful place, and we really love it. But I said, you know what? I'm going to run for the board. And if people ask me why are you running for the board, my response is why not? I'm an O negative blood donor. Anybody who gets my blood can use it. I've been donating for decades, but that's not something. I consciously, I'm going to be an O neg blood donor. No, that's how I was created, and so it'd be very selfish of me not to share that. So I donate, and I donated for years with Vitality in Colorado, and now I donate with Life South here in Gainesville, Georgia. And it's just something I like to do. I'm playing in a rock and roll band.
Wow, I forgot about that. Oh my God, you were teasing with some of the videos this summer when everybody were distancing with masks and still playing. Okay, you have to tell us more. Yes, please.
Well, when I moved to the United States in '67, the first thing I did, I played music pretty much my whole life, and I wanted to really get into rock and roll. So I went down to a local music store and ended up getting a gig with a really popular local group. And so I played for rock and roll bands through college and all that sort of stuff. It was just great fun to do. And then it was ironic, after moving to Crestwind here in Gainesville, Georgia, to retire, I joined a rock and roll band. So
Wow.
Nothing changes. And guess what? Everybody in our band, Izabela, is younger than Bruce Springsteen. So it's a win, because he's getting old too, but he's older than we are. So we're doing music by the Eagles in Chicago and Santana and Joe Cocker and
all those great classics. I love all of that. Yes.
Yeah, just having fun, and why not? I can still play piano, and guess what? I can still donate blood. And guess what? I've got board experience. So maybe if I get elected here, that's the key. I still have to be elected. Maybe I can offer something to the community I live in. So, like I say, get up every day. And what's the challenge you want to identify, and how can you solve it?
Yeah, that is brilliant, because you have that servant leadership mindset. And guys, again, that are listening and watching, this is so important, because guess what? That creates domino effect, compound results. Either you're retired or not, or whatever, people will always gravitate towards you, and great opportunities, specifically during challenging economic times, will always come your way. So I know we cannot travel right now, but what is on the bucket list on your travel agenda when you actually can?
Well, one of the things that my wife and I were looking at, it's still probably not totally out of the picture, but was literally doing around the world cruise. We're seriously looking at it. But there's just too many uncertainties. And it's ironic because this is the sort of thing you work for your whole life. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this and we're going to do that, but we're going to save up and then do all these things. So that's on the back burner. I think Norway's possibly on the list. But right now, the most important thing is we have a fourth grandchild on the way with our daughter and son-in-law in Colorado. And we're going to be seeing them at Christmas. And so right now, that's the most important thing for us is our fourth grandchild. We have 3 down here. And so instead of coming to Georgia to visit the grandkids, now we'll be going to Colorado to visit. We'll probably drive instead of fly. I'm not saying flying is dangerous. It's just we can drive. We don't have to be there in 3 hours. So, but yeah, I think it's priorities. And for right now, that it's our grandkids and our soon to be fourth grandchild in Colorado. That's what's most important. If we get to go to Norway or we get to go around the world, that's great. That's gravy. But the grandkids are where it's at.
That is fantastic, and it's such a beautiful thing. Congratulations to you and your wife.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, last question that I'd like to answer, please. Obviously, we're on the Legacy Leaders Show, and you accomplish, again, as I mentioned, phenomenal results in your tenure professionally and personally. But what would you like you to be remembered by? What would you like your legacy to be?
Well, a legacy is not something that you decide upon. That is something the people that you worked with decide upon. That is something that your family decides upon what your legacy is. That's not something that you decide. No, I've made tons of mistakes in life. Who hasn't? But I'm gratified when I can reach out to people that I've worked with 30 and 40 years ago, and through social media, we get to keep in touch. We're still friends. We worked hard together. We made mistakes together. We suffered disappointments together, successes together. But I think that's for me the greatest thing is having people that I've worked with 30 and 40 years ago. We're still friends. We still want to keep in touch, and that's great. That's what makes me happy.
Great perspective, but with our actions, we're carving and creating, either consciously or subconsciously, that legacy. And I'm really looking forward to see in years to come what more and what next.
Yeah, me too.
Brian, it was absolute pleasure to have you here. And if you would like to just to have a closing remarks or anything you want to share with the audience that we discussed earlier, so they can keep in mind how they can be great contributors to local, national, international community.
Show up. Don't. It's easy to say, that's bad. Somebody should do something about that. A great friend and mentor, former Wyoming Senator Alan Simpson, he said that about people who put their name on a ballot. He said, they had the courage of their conviction to put their name on a ballot, to say, this is what I think, these are problems I identify, and this is how I think we can solve them. And then we, the people, get to vote. So don't say somebody should do something about it. Why don't you do something about it? And there's lots of ways to do that. There's so many ways that you can still make a difference and stay safe in this crazy pandemic world.